Let's talk about the ending of Disco Elysium. A lot of people seem to love it, but I've also seen quite a few posts from people who are kinda confused or even think that the ending is bad. These people are of course wrong, but if you only examine the plot, then they do kinda have a point. After all, we did just spend hours running up and down the stairs of the Whirling in Rags trying to solve the murder case. And when we do finally find the murderer, an old man wearing tracksuit trousers leans on the frame stock of his rifle. He gathers a big ball of spit in his mouth. Who? He's a brand new character, almost entirely unrelated to the characters we've been dealing with so far. A guy who has been hanging out around the islands for decades, slowly going mad, in part from isolation, but also because of poison emitted by a large insect. Okay, and then we get to have a conversation with said insect.
What?
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre. Don't the writers care about what a bad Wikipedia summary this makes? If this were a traditional Knives Out style whodunit kind of detective story, then yeah, this ending would be kind of a cop-out. But Disco Elysium is not that kind of story. So let's take a look at the 3 conversations which make up the ending in more detail, and see how they fit in with the greater themes of the game.
Fine. Let's blast Sad FM then.
So we go on this beautiful boat ride to the island, and there we are prompted to sleep.
There's a greasy old spring mattress in the corner.
Harry is super exhausted from being shot early in the game. It's actually okay because I'm carrying like 20 nose sprays, but wait a moment. The developers have been preparing us for this. As players, we know that sleep isn't just for healing in this game. It's also for this.
That's right, funky baby.
So we go to bed and, of course, we have a dream. We walk outside and soon we find ourselves in a place from Harry's memory. And this is where we meet a character named after Dolores Day, a historical ruler of Revachol and Innocence who is worshipped to this day. But when we talk to her, it becomes clear that this is also Harry's ex-girlfriend Dora. Harry is conflating the two of them, literally turning his ex into one of the most influential figures in history. And it's somewhat fitting because in Harry's personal history, Dora was probably the person who impacted him the most. This is a brilliant bit of characterization, showing just how much this man idolizes his ex. For the entire game, the writers have been drawing parallels between Harry's personal story and that of Revachol in general. The city is positively oozing with history. The face of the city is defined by bullet holes and craters from battles which took place decades ago. Many of the current issues plaguing Revachol can be traced back to that time in history. For example, the city is still being controlled by the Coalition to this day. The developers are making it clear that the system in place is inadequate to meet the people's needs. There is an atmosphere of coming change in the air, be it either a great calamity or some kind of liberation. And then there is our protagonist, Harry. He starts the game out awakening after a drunk bender, where he reportedly screamed, "I don't want to be this kind of animal anymore." He remembers nothing, not about Revachol, not about himself, not even his name.
There is nothing.
But Harry is anything but a blank slate character. Just like Revachol, he is marked by his history. A history which shapes him both physically and psychologically. Throughout the game, we get to decide, through our choices, what kind of animal we hope our Harry will become, all while piecing together who Harry was and how he ended up in such a miserable state. Which brings us back to the dream. So here we meet Dolores Day, or Dora, with her suitcases packed, on the verge of leaving for another continent. It is actually possible to call Dora at an earlier stage in the game. There it is confirmed that she has indeed left the country, and now lives many time zones away with a new partner. To Harry, Dora was his guiding light, the reason and motivation behind him joining the RCM in the first place. Their breakup would leave him spinning out of control, eventually leading to his downward spiral. At the same time, Dolores Day was the guiding figure of moralism, the dominant political ideology in the world of Disco Elysium. But just like the Dora Harry dreams of, this version of Dolores Day is almost certainly fictional. The ideology of moralism clearly isn't working for the people of Revachol. Just as Harry is left to reinvent and redefine himself, so must Revachol. Holding on to this fiction is holding Harry back. It causes him nothing but pain. The conversation with Dora is used to make this point, and it's really devastating. Dora resents being idolized. She is ready to move on with her life, move on from what must have been a pretty toxic relationship.
We don't have anything to talk about anymore. Every combination of words has been played out. The atoms don't form us anymore.
As Dora implies, there is no correct dialogue option. Nothing is going to work here. What is so special about this conversation is that the developers use the game's mechanics to make this point. As usual, tutorial, there are skill checks and our abilities are chiming in, trying to guide us through the conversation. But here the roles don't really matter. There's this especially cute moment when Rhetoric thinks he can help us win back Dora by pointing out her inconsistencies.
I made her love you again, Harry.
And Volition's just like,
Are you stupid?
you can't debate your way out of this. And then there's this horrible red suggestion check, where you can attempt to give Dora a kiss, which...
This was not about failure or success. This was always going to be horror.
Suggestion is pretty upset afterwards as well.
Brother, you should put me in front of a firing squad.
Lastly, there's also a quest to complete in this conversation. There's a figurine you can buy at the pawn shop, and here you can attempt to give it to Dora.
No, please. Please don't give me anything.
Again, it will only make her confused and sad. She does not want it. So even completing a task which would usually reward us as players does absolutely nothing here. At the end of the dream, there is one last terrifying reveal.
Once this dream starts happening, it keeps happening. 3 times a week, at least.
Harry dreams of Dora multiple times per week.
Oh yes, this is real darkness.
To me, the message here is clear. To get better, one must stop idealizing a mythical past. Which brings us to a man whose entire existence has become defined by a single moment. He's the man we have been looking for all along, our culprit in the murder case. We meet him at the other side of the island, sitting at a fire pit. The game barely gives us enough time to digest the talk we had with Dora before we dive into this next extremely dense conversation. His name is Joseph. We find out that he was part of the communist army during the war between the coalition forces and the communists. This would be the battle which would seal Revachol's fate, dealing a defeating blow to the communist forces. While his comrades were getting bombed by the coalition, Joseph hid away. He deserted. The writing highlights the sheer brutality with which the communists were annihilated, and the bitterness this caused in young Joseph.
The combined might of international capital, all at once, all the greed and terror in the world, tore into Revachol. It lifted streets from the ground and turned houses into ghosts.
When he finally emerged from his hiding place, his comrades were all dead. He was the only survivor of what to him was an apocalyptic event. This is where we find some of my favorite lines in the game, providing context to what we have seen in the city so far.
Great terror. Worse than you've ever seen.
The mask of humanity fall from capital. It has to take it off to kill everyone, everything you love. All the hope and tenderness in the world.
Joseph's survival would become his sin. This moment of cowardice at a young age of 16, his desertion, it would define him from there on out. It's the name the game assigns to him, literally labeling him as the deserter. Unable to move on, he has been holding out ever since, hanging around the islands for an insanely long time.
51 minus 8 equals 43.
Thank you, Logic. 43 years of isolation, feeling more and more hateful as time goes on. He spent his day watching the people of Revachol, always through the lens of his trauma.
Traitors, pigs, rabbits, and dogs.
How dare they move on, forget, even have fun? He will not take part in normal life. Not unlike Harry, he too idolizes the past to a point where he is unable to live in the present. In a way, the deserter represents what Harry may become. And if the conversation with Dora is telling us to move on, the deserter shows us what happens if we do not. So the guy ends up being the killer we were looking for. Someone who is past redemption.
I wanted his brains to spill out on her.
It feels almost anticlimactic, to be honest. I'm glad Kim is happy though.
This feels good, doesn't it?
Of course the game does not end on such a tragic note though. Just as we are getting ready to arrest the deserter, something reveals itself in the reeds. The Insulindian phasmid, a bizarre giant insect creature. At this point I only have one question. Is Harry hallucinating here? Because although a lot of his hunches did end up being correct, his perception has often been a bit weird.
There's nothing there.
Oh please no. And then Kim says this.
I can see it.
4 simple words. Thank God.
It's real. I love how Kim and Harry are both completely in awe of this creature. This is where, provided we did a certain side quest, we can approach the creature. Kim even takes a picture as proof, and we can show it to our co-workers later, and they are totally blown away. It's so awesome. This highlights an aspect of Disco Elysium we haven't talked about yet in this video. Although Disco Elysium has a lot of bleak moments, it is still a hopeful game. People finding meaning in different ways, like the dice maker who seems to be doing just fine in an otherwise abandoned commercial building. The message left by Cindy the Skull. There is a general sense that change may just be around the corner. We also see small miracles happen. Even the deserter can't help but feel hope from time to time. And then there's the Phasmid, which, although unexpected, is actually not out of place. Disco Elysium contains this side quest where we help some cryptozoologists on their search to find a novel kind of species. This sends us on a multi-step journey where we visit and revisit traps laid out by the zoologists. Again and again, we are faced with the option to opt out of this side quest. Kim is really dismissive and kind of bothered by the whole thing. But again and again, we can decide to keep going anyway, even though every time we check the traps, there is nothing. Sorry, Kim. By the end of it, it just seems like a quest which led nowhere at all. And it's just this setup which makes the moment where we find ourselves eye to eye with this creature so powerful. It shows that the unexpected can and does happen, that holding out hope does actually pay off. Finding this insect in and of itself is a miracle. But if we went along with the cryptozoologist quest just for long enough, we can even talk to the creature.
I exist.
So Harry is just hallucinating though, like Kim just sees us staring at the insect here. But that doesn't stop us from having one of the most interesting conversations in the game. We talk to the Phasmid about existence. The Phasmid tells us it's a simple creature existing on a moment-to-moment basis. This makes us muse about the human condition. For humans, existing is more complicated than that. We carry around our concepts, thoughts, interpretations, memories, all the time. We can't switch it off, it's just always there.
Few of us can begin to imagine the horror of you, with all of creation reflected in your foreplay.
The Phasmid calls us
A violent and irrepressible miracle. The vacuum of cosmos and the stars burning in it are afraid of you.
What a line. Humans can conceive of nothingness. And nothingness is not the same thing as merely a vacuum like it would be found in space. Nothingness is something different, something truly scary. The absence of anything. Of course, the Pale comes to mind, and we talk about how it seems like the Pale showed up with humans. We can tell the Phasmid that we are doing our best to keep it together.
That must be incredibly hard. The arthropods are in silent and meaningless awe of you. Know that we're watching. When you're tired, when the vision spins out of control, the insects will be looking on, rooting for you.
So the bugs are rooting for us. What is happening here is kind of cool. We are having a conversation about the human condition and existential dread with a large insect. An insect who is showing us empathy. That's pretty out there, and at least to me, it's beautiful. There's this article by Keith Gordon which I really love. He takes a look at Disco Elysium through the lens of existentialism, and he talks about this conversation with the Phasmid at length. The article ends with the following passage. That is the vision of hope offered by existentialism. To know that the world is indifferent, that nothingness lurks within and around you, and yet not to flinch. To know that there is no essential truth, only choices you can make, most of them painful, most of them wrong, and yet despite that knowledge, to wake up to the world and make those choices anyway, day after day, second by second.
In honor of your will, Lieutenant Euphrator, that you kept from falling apart in the face of sheer terror, day after day, second by second.
It's such a wonderful article, and I can't recommend it enough. Link is in the description. In the end, we are prompted to say what we think about the bug. Easiest choice of my life. And it tells us to move on from Dora, to stop wallowing in the past, this time explicitly, and just like that, it disappears. What a beautiful and weird ending for a beautiful and weird game. We have these three phenomenal conversations revisiting some of the main themes of Disco. A game about moving on and holding on to hope in the face of despair. And then we meet our co-workers and the game ends. This ending doesn't attempt to wrap up every single loose thread we have encountered. But that's okay, because that's not what Disco Elysium was about in the first place. We are, after all, just a visitor in Martinez, staying roughly for a week. We experience countless little vignettes and short stories rather than one grand narrative. Harry is the main character of the game, but at the same time, the events unfolding in Disco Elysium don't revolve around him. He's not meant to solve every mystery that exists in this deep world. It wouldn't really make sense, to be honest, either. At the same time, the ending the game gives us, it's something I think about all the time. I mean, obviously, I even started a YouTube channel just to talk about it. But even on a more personal level, it really had an impact on me. In moments I find myself despairing, in those moments I can't help but think about the deserter. And then I think of the insects, rooting for me,